Alright, so Night of the Seven Kingdoms, episode 5, In the Name of the Mother. Okay, so that was quite an episode, huh? So let's take it step by step, right? Because there's a lot to unpack in this one. So first off, it's the trial by 7. We're gonna get right into the action, right? Baelor decides to give everyone the pep talk of these men are gonna try to kill you, and you should probably not die while you do that, which is ironic considering the actual end of the episode, but we won't get into that right now. And there's a funny part of Duncan Raymond actually puking, and Humphrey Harding's like, green boys, which is another ironic sort of head tilt, because he actually ends up dying in the jousting, whereas Duncan Raymond survived, so maybe it pays to be green in this case. And then there's also that line from Lionel about boys who aren't loved by their mothers fight the hardest, and I wonder if that's also sort of a reference to Maekar, who actually ends up dealing the sort of killing blow to Baelor. I mean, granted, we don't know much about Mariah Martell, Baelor and Maekar's mother, but it would stand to reason through normal, familiar sort of relations that Baelor, being the oldest, might have had the most of their mother's love, and Maekar, being the youngest, might have had their least. So there's a reference there if you care to look for it. Anyway, though, it's time for the trial to actually get started, and at this point, Egg decides to do his squirely duties and gives Dunk the lance. And they have like this little cute joke of, I'll run you down with dogs. Like it's a recall back to episode 2, right? It's at this time it's a little more sorrowful because, right, it's like the idea that Dunk might not actually make it out of this alive, so it's almost like a parting for them. Anyway, though, then Dunk dons the helmet, and the conch actually blows and signals the start of the trial, and everyone starts running, galloping with the horses, and then Dunk's just kind of standing there, and it's like, whoa, Dunk, what are you doing? And it's sort of like, he's in shock, right? He doesn't really know what to do. He's never done this before, but thankfully Thunder gets him going, and Egg snaps him back into it, and he and Arion go and break the lances against each other, and actually, it's only one tilt they go against each other. They both fall off immediately, or at least Arion dismounts, whereas Dunk actually, I think, falls off the horse. Then into flashback mode. But first thing I really quickly want to say is that we can see here one of the Kingsguard knights beating down Humphrey Harding off of his horse, and I think he's already dead at this point. Anyway, it's just a nice little sight, because, the trial mostly focuses on Dunk's perspective, and most of what Dunk is doing is fighting Arion, right? So you only get occasional glimpses to the other people. And so you really gotta look for little things like that to actually see very important things happen. Nevertheless, though, we get into the flashback mode, which, honestly, we saw a lot of this in the, coming ahead trailer after the first episode, and I just assumed a lot of it was going to be in, episode 2, maybe a little bit in episode 3, but no, here we are in episode 5, and we're finally getting Dunk's flashback story. Anyway, though, it opens on Dunk looting the remnants of what looks like a Blackfire battle. I think we've got some Lannister banners, we've got some sort of green banners. I think that could probably be the Stokeworth banners, because we actually see the Stokeworth banners later in the episode, and they're predominantly green. And we also see a Blackfire sigil in the background. I think that's like the first official Blackfire sigil we've seen on screen. We don't really count the sort of announcer from House of the Dragon's first episode. And while we're meeting Dunk, we meet his childhood friend Rafe. It seems like them two are buddies, grew up in Flea Bottom. Dunk and Rafe are looting the remnants of a Blackfire battle, because they're trying to get, whatever they can from the wounded and the dead to try and purchase their way across the narrow sea, right? And I really like how they specifically say the war is over, and Rafe mentions, no, it's not over. People don't forget. If you punch someone, they'll punch back, and they'll hate you for it as long as they live. Which is she's right, of course, especially if you know Ice and Fire timelines. They're talking about the first Blackfire Rebellion, right? Which is mentioned several times throughout this episode. In fact, the guy they trade the gear for specifically mentions Daemon's rebellion is over, which is very nice. I think that's the first actual name drop we get of the Black Dragon as well, which actually Dunk says that exact line, the Black Dragon is dead, which is what prompts the whole conversation of it's not over, right? Anyway, though, they get into the city, they trade their wares, and we also meet this really bad Gold Cloak. This is not a nice guy, right? I'm assuming he's a Gold Cloak by the armor, right? It's a nice little mashup between the House of the Dragon, gold cloaks, and the Game of Thrones, sort of just slightly gold-tinted chainmail. So again, it's like the Kingsguard armor or the Iron Throne. You can kind of see how the stuff from earlier in the timeline morphed into what's later in the timeline. Nevertheless, though, Dunk and Rafe, after trading in their stuff to get, I think it's 2 silver stags, which is all the money they need to cross the narrow sea, apparently, they have a little talk, and we learn that Dunk's mother, unfortunately, I think left him, and she probably passed away somewhere out in the great wide world. Either way, though, they're both orphans. They're both flea bottom orphans, and and they're just trying to, make the best of their situation, and what Rafe thinks is the best thing they can do is go across the narrow sea. And I really like how Dunk mentions that, like, well, what if wherever we go is just worse than here? And Rafe's just like, well, it's a sad world indeed, isn't it? Nevertheless, though, on the morrow, Dunk and Rafe, they try to book passage across the sea, but the guy tells them that no, price has doubled because everyone's trying to get out now that the war's happened. And then, unfortunately, when Dunk and Rafe leave, they run into the Gold Cloak, who's upset that Rafe stole his wineskin. I mean, this guy's a Gold Cloak. He can't afford a new wineskin. I mean, of course, I get the point. The point is this guy's a jerk, and things escalate as you might expect. Bad Gold Cloak and his buddies steal Rafe's money. In return, Rafe steals the Bad Gold Cloak's knife, but the Bad Gold Cloak immediately notices, much like the wineskin, and there's a struggle that ensues, which ends in Rafe's neck getting cut. And Dunk lunges on the Bad Gold Cloak and is speared through the leg by the Bad Gold Cloak's friend, and is probably going to get killed himself before Sir Arland of Pennytree comes a-knockin' and utters the name of the episode, in the name of the mother, leave that boy alone, and he successfully manages to kill the two Gold Cloaks. And it's like, wow, not only did he save Dunk's life, but it explains why Dunk feels so specifically indebted to Sir Arland. This is a pretty good back alley fight, if I do say so myself. Is definitely not a savant of these kind of things. Sir Arland, he's got some moves, to say the least. And you can actually see why, even though he might never have been a champion, he definitely was a pretty okay fighter. Especially against these Gold Cloaks, who probably spend more time harassing civilians than they do actually training in the yard. Whereas Sir Arland is just fresh off the Battle of the Redgrass Field at this point, which also, since his nephew died on the Battle of the Redgrass Field, who was his squire, he's in need of a new squire. And anyway, though, Dunk decides to follow him, and from the looks of things, he sort of, like, keeps his distance until eventually, like, a few days into Dunk just following Sir Arland finally sobers up and gives Dunk, like, a flask of water and is like, get up, kid. Which starts a loving friendship and launches us right back into the Trial by 7, where Dunk wakes up. Just in time to get another Morning Star flashed to the face by Arion. And look, we could go into the ensuing fight, stab for stab, punch for punch if we really wanted to, but the gist of it is this, right? Dunk and Arion, they're fighting on the ground, in the air, with swords. Arion is very fast, he's very skilled, that's why he's using a Morning Star, whereas Dunk is, he's just a guy who's trying not to die, and his advantage is the fact that he's big and strong, right? He doesn't have any of the formal training that Arion has, but he's large, and so that's his great advantage, right? That's why Arion was afraid to face him in a one-on-one, which, ironically enough, is just what they end up doing. Anyway, though, eventually Dunk actually takes off his helmet, right? Which, if you have, like, blood impairing your vision and you actively can't really see, then I can understand why you might take it off. And the reason, of course, you do want to take a helmet off is so that we, the audience, can actually see the people's faces, right? Anyway, though, eventually Dunk manages to graze Arion through the thigh, and my car decides to go absolutely nuts and starts rushing towards them, but thankfully Lionel Baratheon manages to sort of block his path, and my car kills Lionel's horse, at which point looks like I think Baelor and Lionel decide to hold my car back together, right? And I think this is the sort of ensuing fight where my car eventually lands the blow on Baelor's head that unfortunately does kill him, right? And also, little nitpick, Lionel Baratheon is the Laughing Storm. I was actively listening, could not hear him laughing during this fight. Literally all you had to do was make the actor go ha ha ha. You could have even done it in post. Nevertheless, though, a few more fights ensues, and eventually it looks like Duncan's down for the count. Even Arion proclaims he's dead, but thankfully, just before the buzzer sounds, in this case the buzzer is the horn, of course, Egg notes that Dunk is actually, his eyelids flutter and he raises up. And also, I just love how Arion's just like, oh, come on, just please yield. And he says that earlier, like, please yield, right? Because Arion doesn't want to do this any more than Dunk does, right? Of course, there are different reasons for this. I mean, Dunk wants to live, whereas Arion just wants to avoid having consequences for any of his actions. Anyway, though, Dunk eventually does get up, and this is when we get into, like, the final exchange of blows. Like, it's no longer Sir Duncan the Tall, as they say in the behind the scenes. He's Dunk from Flea Bottom right now. Anyway, though, eventually he gets Arion on the ground, and Arion does manage to yield, and I really like how you can just hear Dunk's ears ringing, right? Because he had the Morningstar hit his helmet, his ears are ringing, one eye is closed, everything is gonna hurt. Like, he's truly in the thick of it, and yet he still manages to control his rage, and when Arion says yield, he doesn't kill him. Instead, he carries him in front of the crowd and is just like, tell them, and Arion's like, I withdraw my accusation. Which, I don't know if that was like the official, I would assuming he could just say, I yield to the crowd, and that would have done it. Instead, he's all princely. Upon further reflection caused by being beaten within an inch of my life, I have decided to withdraw my accusation. Nevertheless, though, the conch blows, and Sir Duncan the Tall is victorious against Aerion Brightflame Targaryen in the first trial by 7 to have been held in about 200 years, right? And then Dunk gets carried off the battlefield pretty much immediately by Raymond and Steely Pay. Oh, by the way, there is a nice little flash of Raymond versus Stefan, and Raymond pretty much tackles Stefan on the ground, which is actually a nice little touch. His armor's heavy, right? So it's like the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Whereas Raymond is, I think, just wearing boiled leather. Also, he does have a nice little green apple shield, which would have liked to have seen like a little image of him painting that. But nevertheless, if you know where that's going, then, well, it's very nice touch. And then, of course, Steely Pay and Raymond give Dunk the lowdown of what happened to everyone else. And Baelor then enters the tent, seemingly alright. And Dunk kneels before him and is like, I cannot thank you enough. I'm your man. And Baelor's like, you know, I think we need good men. I specifically need good men. And pretty quickly, you start to notice that Baelor is not necessarily all there, right? I mean, it's sort of overshadowed in the moment by, like, Dunk falling over, and you could even just make the argument that, like, you know, maybe Baelor's a little unsteady on his feet, because, you know, they did just fight, and he's clearly bloody, he clearly took some injuries, right? But then he starts rattling about how strong his brother is, and the helmet got cracked or whatever, and then the helmet gets taken off, and before you even hear anything, you hear the sort of squelch of the gray matter, and you see Egg and Raymond and Steely Pay looking, and again, we still haven't seen it yet, but Baelor touches behind his head, and you hear the awful squish, and he turns around, and you see that his head is just completely smashed in. And rightly so, Dunk and Egg and everyone is just like, no, 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 why is this happening? And I must say, even as me, someone who knows the history of Ice and Fire, and knows that this was going to happen, it still hit me right in the feels. I was like, no, why did you kill him? This guy is the best that there ever was, and you killed him. And it's the same thing that happened to Ned Stark and Viserys from House of the Dragon, where it's like, these people, they were really, really good people. They tried to do the best they possibly could, and when they tried to do the right thing, they paid for it with their lives, right? The world is, they were too good for this cruel world. And so yeah, that's where the episode, rightly so, ends on that sort of amazing sort of climax, right? Which I will say, George Martin, when he writes battles and wars in general, he tries to usually make it sort of a mixed bag, right? Where even if one side is victorious, they don't usually get away scot-free. And this is a pretty good example of that, right? Where Dunk may have won the trial, and, you know, Humphrey Beesbury and Humphrey Harding may have died. But these are people that, while they're cool people, I'm sure you haven't really gotten to know throughout the story. But Baelor dying, that is just a smack in the gut, in the heart. And for the realm as well, what's going to happen now? I mean, the succession is changed. I mean, now at this point, Baelor is going to be the king, and now his son Valar is next in line. And Valar, I mean, he seems like a decent guy, but, I mean, is he gonna measure up to his father, Baelor? What Baelor could have been? I mean, that is always the question that we will echo throughout the halls of Westeros, and everyone who will sit the Iron Throne from this point on is, what would the reign of Baelor Breakspear Targaryen have been like? Nevertheless, though, that's all we'll say on this episode for now, because, well, it is over, and the next episode's the finale as well, so genuinely very, very much look forward to that. And until that point, though, I say thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one, so see you later.